So let's define discernment for a second. All right, let's define discernment. I'm going to start with Old Testament, as we were just saying, Deuteronomy. All right, and this is actually going to be found in chapter 18. Okay, and this is specifically verse 21 through 22. Okay, and it reads this, but you may wonder, how will we know whether or not a prophecy is from the Lord? They're speaking about prophets in the land in context. Okay, so Moses is helping them decipher the difference between a true and a false prophet in this context. And this is what he says: if the prophet speaks in the Lord's name, but his prediction does not happen or come true, you will know that the Lord did not give that message. That prophet has spoken without my authority and need not be feared. Okay. So, one of the greatest signs to know if somebody who is saying something that is claiming to be from God is if what they said to be from God comes true. So, I actually just want to go ahead and put this in here for some of you who are constantly weighing yourself down and causing yourself to have sleepless nights because you are up thinking and contemplating and being so self-convinced that somebody that isn't yours is yours from the Lord. I want to free you for a second because it didn't come to pass, therefore let it go. I know you said God told me I was your husband. God said I was your wife. God said, and guess what? They went on and they married somebody else. They're with somebody else and they said no to you, which means what? You are free to let it go. And guess what? You continuing to hold on to this is a you problem, not a God problem. I literally just helped a majority of you with this issue right along. Okay. But let's keep it moving because there's an implied perspective given in these verses alone. And then what we see in the New Testament from the words of Jesus in regards to false teachers and prophets that you also want to take into consideration. Because realize how in Deuteronomy 18, one thing that we can clearly see that isn't mentioned is the removal of said false teachers and prophets, right? He's not coming in here just removing these people from the land and from the scene. So that must mean that there's something we have to engage with in order to decipher between what's real and what's not. All right, this is going to get good. Hang with me. All right, Matthew 7 is where we're going to next. All right, now obviously this is one of four gospels, not the first gospel written. Mark was the initial gospel written, the others followed. Okay, but Matthew talks about Jesus from the perspective of him being the coming king. Okay, Matthew being a very analytical individual, being a once tax collector, now turned disciple. Okay, the context and viewpoint of Jesus, he's the coming promised king. Okay, he's Matthew's king, he's Mark's suffering servant, he's Luke's great physician, John's word made flesh, as like a nice setup for what to expect, the direction in which each gospel takes. Okay, so hang in there for me. Okay, Matthew 7 and verse 15 and 16. We're getting to the crux of what discernment looks like. All right, and why this matters to this conversation regarding the dating app dilemma. So Matthew 7 verse 15 reads this: beware of false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep but are really vicious wolves. Okay, you can identify them by their fruit, that is, by the way they act. Okay, this is good. So then we'll go further. Can you go? Can he gives a nice little picture here? Okay, can you pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? A good tree produces good fruit. A bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So every tree that does not produce good fruit is chopped down and thrown into the fire. Yes, just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can identify people by their actions. Okay, let that be a nice word for a lot of y'all. You can identify who people are not by what they say, but by what they do. Okay, so why does this matter? Well, of course, in this context, he's on the Sermon on the Mount, he's on the back end of it. Okay, there's some sections here. He gives a golden rule. Okay, Jesus is teaching a group of people who are lowly, group of people who are at their lowest spiritually, economically, mentally, emotionally, all the things, religiously, spiritually. Okay, we're talking about people who are surrounding Jesus, who more than likely are experiencing some form of oppression from Roman government because they have recently just taken over Jerusalem. They've recently just taken over a nice perspective or portion of the lands in which Jesus is navigating through. So Roman government, okay, confusion among the land within religious spirituality. Okay, you got Jews, Greeks not seeing eye to eye. Okay. It's a lot going on. All right. And on this back end, Jesus is moving through this Sermon on the Mount, getting to the heart of the matter without extending or expanding rules to follow. All right. And in this particular setup, he's giving this in context, okay, to not just how you ought to view other people, how you ought to deal with other people, okay, but also what to look for to determine the legitimacies of other people you connect with. And this is where he comes to the context of fruit. All right. So there's a lot of things here without going so far into a Bible study. All right. But this is where we derive these two chapters alone, among so many others throughout the context of the scriptures, is where we derive our custom definition of discernment. Are you ready? I want you to write it down. I want you to pin it. I want you to save it. I want you to find some, put it on your walls, put it as a screensaver. I don't care what you do, but you need to find it. Okay. Here it is. Discernment is the ability to see something for what it is and act accordingly. Discernment is the ability to see something the way it is and act accordingly. In other words, discernment gives you the ability to call a thing a thing. Now, here's layers to discernment, because when we talk about discernment in different layers, even to the lengths of spiritual foundation, okay, what something appears to be in the natural isn't necessarily what it is in the spiritual, right? There's something deeper, greater in the spiritual that can be seen. This is a spiritual principle we're talking about. Discernment, and I should have said this in the beginning. Discernment is a spiritual principle. So if you don't carry a spiritual foundation and you don't value those things, none of this conversation is going to make sense to you. And I think it also is another great reason why you shouldn't even be engaging in dating in the first place. I'm not asking you to be a prophet. I'm not asking you to be a pastor, a reverend. I'm not asking you to go across the lands and preach the gospel. I'm not asking you to have the greatest prayer life. I'm not putting more pressure on you to be some kind of religious Pharisee. Absolutely not. But a spiritual foundation is necessary if we are going to, in any way, shape, or form, navigate these dating streets with the healthiest intentions. So if that is not where you are, and you're like, fam, like I don't have a religion, I don't have a faith with God. I don't even know if a God is real. I'm not saying you don't have a starting place. Obviously, keep showing up, keep being here. But my 2 cents, hey, maybe we should you know, take a moment to step away from the dating scene and figure that out, because that's really important. Those are some really important things to figure out if we want to date to the best of our abilities. Okay, I really do believe that. It's just an opinion. I'll throw that in there. Okay, but discernment, the ability to see something for what it is and act accordingly. Discernment gives you the ability to call a thing a thing. Okay. Now, even though, again, like I said, there's layers to discernment, what you may see in the natural isn't always exactly what it is in the spiritual. Sometimes it's different. Sometimes it's deeper. Okay. And our ability to be in tune with that is important. But I don't want to put so much on you in this first part of the conversation and introductory to discernment that you feel like, oh my God, there's just certain things that I have to grow privy of seeing that I can't see. And it just adds a lot of hoopla to it. Okay. Just to simplify it. And as you engage in this is something that you're able to grow in. Discernment is the ability to see something for what it is and act accordingly. So you want to know why some of y'all are having horrible dating experiences is because you refuse to call a thing a thing. You have every excuse in the book for somebody you're connecting with as to why you want to remain connected to them when they don't even align with you in the first place. Matter of fact, there are some of you who are pre-advancing in the dating spaces because you keep calling somebody you just met your husband, your wife. You got them in your contacts. You got them labeled as that. And there's no ring. There's no proposal. There's no wedding. All talk, no action. Right? And what is the prominent thing that we see in both of these texts that are very important to discernment? It is paying attention to behaviors, not just words. It's fruit, not just words. In other words, words are not fruit, actions are. Can you put that in the chat? And actions are one of the greatest things to pay attention to in order to be able to develop your discernment. I hear what you're saying. What are your actions? I hear that you're interested. Where's the date? I hear that you like this type of music. I hear you like these types of qualities, but where is the behavior, the reach out, the connection. Okay. Where's the attempt? I hear that you apologized, but what are we going to do next time so this doesn't keep happening? Whew. Words are not fruit, actions are. And discernment gives us the ability to lock in with that. Okay. This is as simple as ABC 1, 2, 3, no Michael Jackson. Okay. And I think this is something that could easily give y'all beginning steps to moving in this. This is not to give us new language. This is not to give us more spiritual language to sound better than we are or further than where we are. This is just to help us kind of, kind of not muddy the waters that they've already been in to move healthily. Okay. I got to move on. I can't stay in this, but this is something that makes sense. Okay. First step, understanding what discernment is. Okay. It is not something that you just pray for. It is something that you have to apply. It is not something that you just sit in your prayer closet for and ask God to download, because part of developing discernment is putting in front of you what doesn't look like what you already know. Part of developing discernment is experiencing opportunities that don't quite match where you are and the alignment you want to develop. So for those of you who are begging God for discernment, realize that your part is to play the role of not just knowing him, knowing his word, all the things, but growing further into deciphering between what's real and what ain't. So in other words, you cannot come into these dating fields and expect not to come across duds, crusties, and dusties, because it's a repetition of you recognizing what is real and what ain't. Can I give you another definition while we here? Because he's here. Let's just go there. So Genesis is a great place. Don't you realize before God gave Adam Eve out of his rib, he gave him, we all know it, he gave him work, right? He gave him something to cultivate, something to build. He gave him purpose. We know the whole deal. I find it so interesting that when God first says it is not good for man to be alone, he directs Adam to name animals. Now, it sounds good to preach it. I'm not going to say what I initially want to say because it sounds good preaching, but this ain't no like preachy sermon, okay? I'm not even trying to get you a sermon. I'm just trying to get you to see some things, okay? I just think it's unique that Adam was like able to look at the animals and he just started naming them off. And yet there was still something in him that was like, man, I feel complete. Don't get me wrong. Ain't nothing missing. But this whole idea of man should not be, man is not designed to be alone. And then for his statements when Eve comes up to be bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, I just think that's very interesting. He's like, wow, this looks like someone that reflects me. My body, what I look like, all the things. It just reflects me. And I think it's very, very good case to say, man, even discernment was moving in the garden. Because Adam was even able to discern the difference between an animal and the one that was meant to be and do life with him. The right one and an animal. He was able to discern the difference, at least there, from animalistic behavior to human behavior, healthy behavior. Okay? I think that's interesting. Maybe that's something that you pen. Maybe that's something that you study. I just want to throw that out there. Okay? Because one of the greatest things that we can do to determine and grow in levels of discernment is not always God weeding out that which isn't there and doing it for you. At some point, you have to be able to grow the muscle to tell the difference between what makes sense and what doesn't. And guess how you do it? By calling a thing, by paying attention to fruit, because words are not fruit, actions are. Okay. I hope that makes sense because we're moving on.
Hey you, so glad that you made it to the end of the video. Okay, if you want to know more of the context behind what was shared in this video, be sure to click here, okay, because that's going to be actually the stream replay as part of our recent series or conversation that we shared live with our audience. Be sure to check those out. We go live weekly across all platforms. And also, if you want to know the deeper meaning behind all that was shared and really the biggest goal of getting you to a place of security, to let go of anxious attachment, but more importantly, to learn why you keep losing yourself in the midst of relationships, because it's a lot simpler than you think. It's going to be explained in one video to get you the results you need right then and there. Explains everything. Be sure to click here, okay, for this video. All right, and I hope to see you over there. Peace.